Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today, if you are an author and you are not using your book to get speaking opportunities in front of your target market, then you do not want to miss 1 minute of today's episode. I want to introduce Peter George to you. As a public speaking coach, he specializes in helping professional speakers, authors, consultants, and executives become confident and credible every time they speak. Throughout his childhood, Peter dealt with a lisp and a stutter. Consequently, he grew up shy and introverted, avoiding communication with others as much as possible. When he got into the business world, he quickly realized that his lack of presentation skills kept him at a disadvantage. So, first, he tried to improve his skills with self study. Don't we all? But that took too long, and he missed the feedback that a coach would provide. Then he went for group training. It was even better, but he realized he needed more. So he got a personal trainer and now credits his public speaking coaches for much of his business success. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you, Kim. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's one of those days that I'm tired because I keep wanting to call you George.
I think I get called George more than I get called Peter, so either's fine.
So, one of the things I think we'll start off with is, can you use a book to get on stages? Because, people hear that, but do they really believe it?
Yeah, you're right. People hear that all the time. And if you have a book that's well respected and people get to know, heck, if you just write a book that has some is relevant in your industry to some degree, then you will get speaking gigs as long as people know about it. Just writing the book, that's a great exercise and you should be commended for it. But when people know about it and they understand how it's going to help their audience, yeah, it helps you get on stages.
And, one of the things that I've talked about often is your book as a tool, and it's only as good as how much you use it. And you talked about getting the book known so that you get speaking opportunities. And I think that's the big thing is that, you're using that book to get yourself out there. You're using it as that positioning tool.
Exactly. As entrepreneurs, as business people, we strive to differentiate ourselves from our competitors. And writing a book that's geared to your particular audience is a great way to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Peter, I want you to share a bit of your story because obviously you've had to overcome a lot to be able to be where you are now and help others with their speaking.
Yeah, you mentioned in the intro, when I was young, I had a couple of impediments. I had a stutter and a lisp. And I wouldn't talk to anybody other than my family, close friends, and the like. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I wouldn't answer questions at school. I wouldn't talk to the teachers. And I was very adamant about not having to speak. I was embarrassed, really. And through what they called therapy back then in the 60s, and I don't think they would do it today, they actually went away to some degree. By the time I got to high school, no one knew if they had just met me that I had a lisp and a stutter, except on maybe certain instances where they would rear their ugly heads. And then I got to the corporate world, and I was used to not speaking to people, and I didn't want to speak to people. And I realized in the corporate world, you have to speak to people. And then I was charged with actually having to do presentations, and I didn't want to do them. So again, like you said, I went for help. And I realized I had been studying speaking my whole life. I was just doing it from the other side of the coin. I'd watch people, I'd listen, I just wouldn't do my share of speaking. And it didn't come natural to me, obviously, but it really became something that I realized I was feeling good at in front of others. I just had to get better at it. And I had the same false belief that a lot of people had, that as long as I knew what I was talking about and had the guts to get up there and talk, I'd be fine. That wasn't the case. That's not engaging an audience. That's not keeping their attention. That's not helping them uh, accept a call to action and go do something that will benefit them in some way. So I had to learn all those things. And it's just been a life changer.
When you were talking about that, all I can picture is the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where the teacher's up front going, Bueller, Bueller, and everybody's like falling asleep in the class.
Exactly. It's not just speaking.
Oh.
Kim, I worked for a Japanese company for 9 years when I got out of school, and it was a tremendous company. And I learned the Japanese have a word when you know what you want to say, and you have the guts to get up in front of people and say it. You know what that word is? Karaoke. And how good is karaoke, right? Well, karaoke is, and often after having a couple of drinks, is the guts to get up there and sing the words that you know. And most of the time, that's not very good. And that's what a lot of us do. We just get up there and tell people what we know, the nuts and bolts. But people don't receive nuts and bolts well. They can't digest nuts and bolts.
No, they can't. When you're asking me what word, the only word that came to my brain is chutzpah, which is definitely not from.
Not Japanese, but you got to have some of that. You got to have maybe a little cockiness, maybe just a little bit. But,
So, tell me a little bit more about where you went for group training.
Well, at that time, I was in a Boston office, and Dale Carnegie had just opened a franchise 5 miles from our office. I mean, literally just opened it the month before my vice president said, "You need help." And so it was a great coincidence. And I went there, and it was excellent. And the only thing I didn't like about it was that there were 45 of us or however many in the class. And I really wanted personal attention. So that's when I learned that I could also get one-on-one training from a particular coach. And the company sent me for that, and that was just fantastic. He made more difference in my success than just about anybody other than my wife, who became my business partner later on in life.
Nice. I was wondering if you were going to say Toastmasters, because I know for many, Toastmasters has been an incredible tool. I was in it for 5 years. I didn't have a fear of speaking or anything, but for me, it was just a great tool to get feedback, increase my speaking skills, learn how not to do some of the faux pas. Though, if we were doing this episode in the afternoon after I've been awake and working for 8 or 9 hours, you'd probably hear ums, ahs, the dreaded so. A few of those would sneak in as the more tired I got. But, audience, uh, see, I mention it and then I catch myself doing it.
It happens. As long as it doesn't happen every other word, they're okay.
That is true.
Toastmasters is a fantastic organization. It's been around for so long for a reason. And it's a great place for people to go.
I agree. And I've seen people who couldn't even talk to anybody, sort of like you, within a year or two, not only talking and participating, but actually giving a speech. Now, for some people, it takes a long time. We had a couple of people in our group. It took a year and a half before they even could give their icebreaker speech of a couple of minutes, which was all about them. But it's amazing in terms of, how supportive they are, giving you tools, letting you work at your own pace. And so I highly recommend that, if you check it out, it's available pretty well worldwide. So just about anywhere that you're listening. I can't guarantee to every single country, but most of them do have Toastmasters. So that's a great place to start if you can't even say hello to somebody.
Great organization.
I want to shift gears here because I want to make sure that we take lots of time to focus in on the topic for today. And, that's leveraging your book to boost speaking opportunities. So I'm going to let you go for a few minutes just to share. I know you've prepared some stuff for us on how to do that, and then I'll probably have a few questions for you, or at least a few comments.
Sure. Think of a book as a business card. We have no problem saying, "Here's my business card." Although I remember not too long ago, I was talking to someone, and she said to me, "Do you know how expensive business cards are?" Now, in this day and age, we don't pass out a lot of business cards the way we may have in the past. They were still one of the least expensive marketing tools you could ever have.
Mhm.
So I was kind of taken aback. I look at a book that way, and it's not like I'm wealthy or anything, and I can just pass out books. But this is my book, The Quip, The Captivating Public Speaker. And uh, any prospect I have, any stage I want to get to, this book gets delivered by priority mail.
Yes.
It's a $15 investment between the cost of having the book printed and shipping through priority mail. What better way to spend $15 in your business than to give someone the book that might get you on that stage, whether that's a paid stage or not?
Yeah.
So use it like a business card, a great leave behind. We try to come up with all these pieces of paper or PDFs or whatever we want to do. Use your book. Create a book and use that. It's impressive. And
Yeah.
will everybody who you give it to read it? I guarantee you no. But that's not the point. It's the credibility point. I know what I'm talking about. I can help others. And that's, you know, author to authority. Great name. As the old saying goes, you can't be an authority without having the word author in it. Right? So write a book, you become an authority. Now, it can't be a bad book, but as long as it's a decent book, free of typos and the like, well made, you gain that credibility that will help you get on stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked how you talked about the fact that, yeah, it is an investment. And so let's say it was even a $20 investment, just because it could be. But if you're selling, even if let's say you're selling a $500 service or a $1,000 service, or you're trying to get on the stage where you're going to be in front of hundreds of people, well, when why wouldn't you put out $15 to get out in front of hundreds of people? You can't even do that on social media anymore. If you want to get your ad out in front of hundreds of people, you're going to be paying a whole lot more than $15. I can tell you that.
A lot more. And when you're getting in front of the right audiences, if you provide a service to those people, you will get that money back multiplied so many times, depending on how much you charge for your service. It's a great,
Yeah.
great way to build a business. You can let the other things that you don't want to do. I'll caution this a little bit, but you might be able to let those go.
Well, again, it's really, leveraging the ROI, your return on investment. And here's the thing about books. I don't know about you. I moved almost 2 years ago now. And I had lived in the same house for over 30 years. I had a lot of books. We were paying per pound to move everything across the country. So let me tell you, everything got scrutinized through the do I want to pay to move this? All of a sudden, all these things that seemed really precious just weren't all that precious anymore. But one of the things I went through was all of my books. Now, I kept some. There were some that were near and dear to my heart. There were some that, I would read on a fairly regular basis. They were valuable to me. Those ones came. But a lot of the other books, I just went, But you know what? You don't throw out books. It's almost sacrilegious to throw out a book. So it either stays on your shelf, it moves with you, or you give it to like the Salvation Army or a secondhand bookstore. So, but the funny thing about a book is sometimes you put it on the shelf it might be a year, 2 years, maybe 5 years, 10 years later, but all of a sudden that book is the exact thing you need and you notice it and you pick that thing up. And so for me, even if a person never reads the book, but they put it on their shelf, you just don't know when that seed is just all of a sudden just going to germinate and you get an email or you get a phone call saying, I just read your book and I want to work with you. And you're thinking, who are you? Like, I don't. And so you ask them, they're like, oh, yeah, I got your book 5 years ago.
And you don't know who they lend it to, and this happened to me just once. I'm not saying this is going to happen a lot, if ever in a lifetime, but it happened to me once where I sent a book to someone I wanted to speak at their company, and I didn't get to speak at their company. But the person I sent the book to, who was a high level executive, put it on his shelf. And he was
Mm.
talking to someone who was seated across from his desk, who looked behind him and saw, he didn't see my name. It wouldn't have made a darn bit of difference to him, but he did see on the binding the captivating public speaker, and asked if he could borrow that book. And he became a client. So
Yeah,
you,
you just
you,
never
you never
know.
know where a book will get you, because you're right. They don't get thrown out. They go somewhere. But they
Mhm.
generally don't get thrown out where a business card or a leave behind or something we send in the mail other than something like a book
Yeah, recycling.
often gets thrown out.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, nowadays, half the time, business cards aren't even true business cards. It's some electronic thing that someone transfers to you and gets added to your contacts, and then you never remember who the person is. So,
Exactly.
oh, so one of the things I was wondering about is, when you send, especially when you're looking at applying for speaking engagements, do you just send the book or do you send like maybe a speaker sheet with it? Like, is there anything that you include with this book when you're sending it to get speaking engagements?
It all depends. Sometimes you're filling out a form for a call for speakers, uh, and then I'll fill that out online as requested, and then I'll send the book separately, making note that this goes along with something I filled out online. And so it can be that way. It's all different ways depending on what works in that particular situation. But I never send a book without signing the book to the person I'm sending it to and putting in a handwritten note with it.
Mm.
And as much as a book has helped my business over the last 2 years, some people say, "How did you build your business?" And I tell them all the time, on little note cards. I've been
Yeah.
sending note cards every week. I find a reason if I don't have one otherwise people don't get handwritten notes anymore, and they appreciate them. So every book has a handwritten note with it.
Yeah, you know what? It's not the topic for today, but it's amazing the power of mailing something to someone because it's not done anymore. Everything is done electronically. So when someone receives something in the mail, that's pretty special. Like it makes you stand out the fact that they took the time to mail it to you. Then you signed it and then you had a handwritten note on top of it. Man, that's a winning combination.
It really is, and for all the reasons that we just spoke about, it's just different, and it's
Yeah.
not a number 10 envelope. People
Yeah.
toss those in the trash if they don't know where it's coming from and it doesn't look like an invoice or a bill. Those are thrown away. A note card gets opened.
Mm. Yeah, because it looks like a card. It doesn't look like a.
Yep,
Yeah,
and it's
I
never
love
about
it.
selling. It's always, I'll send
About
them
really.
just to say, "Hope you're having a great summer."
Mm. It's funny those little things. So this was quite a few years ago, but I was having a really bad day, like just one of those no good, down dirty, can't wait for it to be over days where nothing went right. You trip and you stub your toe and you spill something. And then because of that, you're late to a client call because you can't leave the water on the floor because then it's going to ruin the floor. Like, one of those days, right?
Right.
And I went through the McDonald's drive-through. I'm like, I need a coffee. I just really need a coffee. And so I get the coffee. I wasn't paying too much attention. The girl had talked to me a little bit. I guess she could see I was having a bad day because when I went to sip the cup, she had on it, "I hope you have a better day," with a big happy face on it.
Isn't that nice?
So my day was so much better.
And took very, very little effort.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Here's the thing, good customer service always comes back to you.
It does.
Yeah. Give and you shall receive. But you got to give first, and you got to give without expecting to receive. But when you do give, you do receive. It's
It's
just
the
an
same thing in a talk.
amazing.
When you
Yeah.
give a talk, a presentation, it's all about the audience. It's not about you. So everything you just said is 100% true for a talk as well, that you're giving without expectation of receiving. It's all
Yeah.
about the audience and benefiting them. Sometimes we make that mistake. I did when I was young, that, hey, I'm the one in the front of the room or up on stage or at the end of the conference table, standing, speaking, and it's all about me. Yeah. Didn't take me long to find out that wasn't true. It's not
Well,
about
it
me
was
whatsoever.
funny. I got invited to a 3-day online conference, and I won't say who's hosting it or anything. But yesterday was the first session. There was just one session, like, late afternoon, early evening. And there was no value in it. It was just 100% sales pitch to get you on like a discovery call. And I'm like, this was a complete waste of my time. Like, don't get me wrong. Okay. I get the selling from stage. I've sold from stage. But every time I sell from stage, I want to make sure that they leave with a tremendous amount of value, that they leave with things that they can do without me. And when I speak from stage, people come up, they're like, "Oh, Kim, thank you so much. That helped me so much." That's what I want to hear. Now, do I sell? Yeah, I sell packages that help people. Sell them a lot. But what I find better is when someone says, "Kim, I can't do your package right now, but I know with what you taught me, I'll be able to afford it because now I can do things better."
Right.
That's what I want to hear.
Exactly.
Love it. Love it. We're going to shift gears here, Peter. I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about your book, and then I'm going to ask you the question that I ask every single author that comes on the show.
Okay. The book is built very much like my training. As a matter of fact, one of my prior clients called me once. He said, "I bought your book. I read it." He said, "This is virtually what we went through throughout our sessions over the couple of months." And that's what I tried to do. I wanted to give everybody they would get if they were working with me. The only thing you can't get is that immediate feedback, of course. And it's broken up into several sections. One is creating a presentation that resonates with your audience because it's based on your audience. And it shows you how to research your audience, who they are, what they want or need from that presentation, how you want them to feel, how they're going to be transformed. Because if they are not transformed at the end of the presentation, why are we having it? We've all
Amen.
been to those meetings, kind of like what you said about the conference, where a meeting where we go in, we spend an hour listening to a boss or a colleague or whomever speak, and then we leave thinking, I'll never get that hour back in my life. That was a complete waste of time. Well, that's because everybody left the same way they went in.
Yeah.
Unless they're transformed, why have a meeting? Why have a presentation? So it looks at that as well, and then a call to action. So that's the first section in a nutshell. From there, we go on to the actual presentation. And the presentation style that I work with is both on the conscious level, which most of us think of, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? And the like, in the unconscious level. So we talk a lot about body language and what that brings to the presentation. So you're presenting on the conscious level and the unconscious level, and that truly engages people, keeps them engaged, and then helps them go do what they need to do, whether that's think differently, do something, meet with someone, whatever that call to action might be, it provides that as well. And then we also cover how to rehearse. So it covers every aspect that you need as a presenter, whether you want to be a professional speaker, whether you're an executive who speaks on stage in the industry conferences, whether you're someone that speaks in a conference room, or even across the desk one-to-one.
Yeah.
Conversation, engagement, and helping others doesn't change whether it's one person or 1,000 people, other than maybe the size of your hand gestures and mannerisms and the like.
Love it, Peter. Love it. All right, are you ready for the question?
I am.
Okay, what was the good, the bad, and the ugly about writing, editing, and publishing that book?
The good was the day it was finished.
I hear that a lot.
I told my wife the day it was finished, I literally felt the weight leave my shoulders. It was such a great feeling. And that was absolutely fantastic. I had a wonderful, wonderful editor who took a lot of that weight off my shoulders prior to that. But when the editor said, my job's done here, and I looked over one last time, it was like, this is a great feeling. The bad was, I don't know if this was bad, but it was at the time, was I went through 3 iterations. I wrote the book and said, this is horrible. I wrote the book and said, this doesn't, to me, feel like what I teach. I rewrote the book. So I went through it 3 times, and then it became what I wanted it to be at the beginning.
Yes.
So that was a good 2 at the end, obviously. But while you're going through it, many times I kept saying, I don't want to do this. I'm done. And here's the thing you might not know, Kim. For 15 years, I ran a publishing company. So this was not my first experience with books on either side of it. And I knew what to expect, but still, once you get in those trenches, it can be a daunting task. The thing is, it's a wonderful one when you're done.
Yeah.
And truthfully, the journey, you learn a lot about yourself during the journey of writing as well. And then, let me see, the ugly, I think you'd be better off asking my wife. My wife.
My husband.
Go ahead.
My husband just finished going back to school, and he graduated at 60 years old.
Good for him.
And he was never an academic. He actually failed grade 3. They had to repeat him. When he went to college, he had to take remedial English. So going back to school at like 58 years old, it was really hard for him, but he did it. So just recently they had a celebration for him, and everyone congratulated me as well as congratulating him, because I was the one who had to live with him while he went through all of this.
My wife would know exactly what it's like. She's the one that had to listen to me every night when we'd come home from work and, hey, how was your day? It didn't take her long not to ask that question.
Yeah.
And she could tell, just like most of us can with someone we know well, by the look on their face, whether they had a good day or not so good day. And so she had to listen to me to complain, and she was very good. She's my best friend, and she would listen, nod her head, smile when it was required, and then say, so if it was a negative thing, what are you going to do about it? What's your plan? What are you doing tomorrow? And I took that advice from people when they said, write at the same time every day. And my wife looked at me once and she said, you've known this through your experience before from creating presentations. I also play the guitar and the like. She said, you can't sit down at the same time just because that's when the clock says to sit down.
Yeah.
You have to do it when the mood strikes. And unless you're using that as an excuse of, well, I can't write for the next week because the mood never struck. No, when the mood strikes, sit down, she goes, and then you'll sit down for hours and bang out everything you want to get down on paper or in the computer. And she said, that's when you do best. So she knows me better than I do. It's not unusual. So once I applied that, Kim, things were totally different. And she says, this is the way you've always written. I write articles for business journals and the like. And she said, you can't get an assignment from one of the business journals and say, okay, I'm going to write this. That's not you. You can wait till 3 days from now and go, it's 10 o'clock at night. I know exactly what I want to write for this article, or at least the outline, and you get started. So that was the ugly book for her. It really was at times, but no one deserves the credit of this book other than two women, my wife and my editor. They both deserve much more credit than I will ever deserve for this book.
Oh, Peter, thank you. We have enough time for you to share a final thought for us, and if you have any freebie or anything that you would love to tell us about today.
Yeah, to your audience and your listeners, just help people. Focus on that. We too often focus on ourselves, and that's when we get nervous and scared. And what if I screw up and all that? Just have the thought that you're going to help people. And if you really want to get into speaking, learn how to do it well so you can help them even more. As far as how I can help your speakers more, they can go to petergeorgepublicspeaking.com. Nice and easy. petergeorgepublicspeaking.com, and they can sign up for free tips. And they'll get those free tips, and I believe those will help them along the way.
Peter, thank you. It's been a pleasure and a joy having you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
Audience, you know what time it is. I'm going to tell you where to go next. If you're on YouTube, you're going to click the thumbnail that my daughter has placed somewhere here on the screen, and you're going to go to episode 487, The Hidden Secret of Language with Steve Lowell. Another great episode that's going to help you move your speaking forward. If you're on your podcast app, unfortunately, you are going to be swiping back about 30 episodes, but I promise you it's one that you will find enjoyable and helpful. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you on the very next episode. Bye now.